All right, guys. Hi, it's Amy. We're going to start on our series with calcium, chloride, and phosphorus. So here we go with calcium. Many of us are familiar with calcium because of all of the education of drink milk, eat healthy, have strong bones. You don't want osteoporosis. So this one isn't as hard to understand as maybe some of the others. Calcium, obviously, we know is important for the formation of teeth and bones. But it's also important for all types of muscles, skeletal, smooth, and cardiac. It's important for contraction of all those types of muscles. It is a factor in the blood clotting process, so if we have an abnormality of calcium, it can affect our blood clotting. And it also maintains cell structure and permeability. This is not scientific. You may laugh at me how I remember calcium, but you know, when you get calcifications like on your shower head, if you have hard water, and it's that white, crusty, stone-like material, I kind of think of that as I'm talking about calcium. And I kind of think that, hey, yeah, that would make sense to add structure to things, such as cell structure and teeth and bones. Calcium-rich foods, we know that we're going to pick out kind of our outliers here. Your sheets, if you have them in front of you, do not have some of these listed. We know that dairy products, milk and yogurt and those kinds of things, cheese, are high in calcium. We also know that dark green leafies are, but legumes as well, whole grains as well, nuts, and molasses. So go get you some molasses today, right? We know that a majority of the calcium is kept up in our teeth and bones. In fact, 99% of calcium in our body is in our bones and teeth. But there is some circulating calcium, and there are different levels or different values. If you look at lab work, you're going to see that there may be a serum calcium, and it will have a different reference range than an ionized calcium. And you may be like, what in the world is this? Well, a normal total serum level, and this is the one that I would mainly recommend memorizing. And we will say it's about 9 to 10, okay? My 9 to 10-year-old loves milk. Wouldn't you agree? Don't your 9 to 10-year-olds love milk at lunch? They have chocolate, they have strawberry, and at my kids' school they even have like a French vanilla. Good times to be a kid, right? Anyway, 8.9 to 10.1, somewhere close to there is where you should be memorizing your reference range. This is the most common test. And so when you're questioned on a calcium level, this is the result you probably are going to be asked about, since it is the most common test used. However, there is another test called an ionized calcium level, and you may notice that that level is about half, 4.5 to 5 or so, which is right at half of your 9 to 10. And the reason for this is that if you look at how calcium is made up in the body, 99% of it is in the bones, but that 1% is now what we're talking about that's left, that's circulating in the bloodstream. About 41% of all extracellular calcium is bound to proteins. And of that, they're bound to things called citrate or other organic ions, and that's okay. And then about half of it is ionized or free, so it's not bound to anything, and this is what they are measuring. Now, if you look at the total serum level of 8.9, or let's just say 9 to 10, and if you look at about half of it is circularized, I'm sorry, that's not even a word, if you look that about half of it is free, ionized, ready for use, it's not bound to any citrates or organic ions or any other kind of compounds, that would make sense of why you have your level of 4.5 to 5. So I've kind of highlighted that word half. That is the only active form of calcium, and it's the only type of calcium that is responsible for physiologic functions. Now your question may come up, well, what about the calcium in the bone? Is that not able to maintain physiologic functions? That is a storing of your calcium that can be pulled out and put back into the bones depending on the needs of the body. So how do we regulate calcium? Oh, I can't talk. Sorry, guys. Not feeling the best today. Okay. Regulated by parathyroid hormone. We know that. We've talked about in MedSurge 2 how if you have a thyroidectomy, what needs to be at the bedside? Or at least, not at the bedside, but at least immediately available is calcium. Because if we have low parathyroid levels, then we have low calcium. Parathyroid draws calcium out of the bones and increases the serum level. It promotes the body to reabsorb calcium so it doesn't excrete it. It stimulates the intestines to do the same. And when the body has a surplus of calcium, meaning that there's too much calcium, we don't need all this, the body says, hey, you know what, let's decrease the amount of parathyroid hormone that's being excreted. And what happens is then we see calcitonin come into play. Calcitonin is a hormone that is an antagonist to the parathyroid hormone. Basically, parathyroid hormone pulls, calcitonin keeps. Parathyroid hormone pulls calcium from the bones, calcitonin keeps calcium in the bones. And so calcitonin is going to decrease calcium in the bloodstream. We know that vitamin D is important for the absorption of calcium in the intestines. And what are our sources of vitamin D? We know milk, we know supplements, and we know the sun is important. Phosphorus, it's important to understand, has an inverse relationship with calcium. So when calcium goes up, phosphorus goes down. Make sure there's nothing else I want to... Oh, I just dropped all my stuff. Hang tight for a second. This is a brief intermission, right? I just lost my stuff. I could sing you a song, give you a little elevator music, but just hold tight. I'm not going to do that. All right, I found my place. So it's important to understand parathyroid hormone is going to increase the calcium. Calcitonin is going to decrease the calcium, vitamin D is going to increase the calcium, and phosphorus is going to decrease. We're going to see a decrease in calcium. And again, here's the saying, parathyroid pulls, calcitonin keeps. Moving on to low calcium or hypocalcemia. The causes are decreased dietary intake. Isn't that what we've said all along about every electrolyte, that a low dietary intake can cause low levels? We understand that alcoholism is a couple-fold here. Number one, alcohol, they typically don't have a healthy diet because they're drinking the alcohol to replace the nutrients of healthier foods. And we also know that low magnesium levels will affect the parathyroid hormone, if you remember that from our previous section. And if we have a low parathyroid hormone, we have a low calcium. We can have decreased absorption through the GI tract, or we can see an increased excretion from the kidneys through loop diuretics. Loop diuretics excrete more than just potassium, which many of us didn't understand. Why is it important to understand that a low albumin level would cause hypocalcemia? If you remember, about half of that calcium is circulating calcium is bound to other things, and albumin would be one of them. We talked about low parathyroid hormone and low vitamin D. Here is, now this is one mnemonic that I do remember. I remember hypocalcemia. I don't have a love for cats. Sorry. I'm allergic to them, so any cat lovers out there, I'm sorry to say that, but I remember I am not a lover of cats. I have a low love for cats. Hypocalcemia, and here's our mnemonic: convulsions, arrhythmias, tetany, spasms, and stridor. So we see an irritability of the nervous system here. And symptoms are related to that nerve transmission, muscle and heart function, and it's an overstimulated neurological function. We can see progressive neurological symptoms. This is where we can see a positive trousseau's or chavastics. And you can see A is a chavastic and B is trousseau's, and that's when we take a blood pressure cuff and pump it up. I think it only has to be to even like 20 millimeters of mercury. It's not very much. It's not a huge amount. And you can see, I remember low, look how the hand is pointing downwards. So low calcium for that. Treatment, going kind of back to that, treatment of hypocalcemia, we're going to see IV calcium gluconate being given for severe cases. And remember, that was the treatment of choice if we had what? Do you remember? Treatment of choice for hypermagnesemia. We can give calcium supplements as well if it's a less severe case. Okay, for high calcium levels or hypercalcemia, we can see that hyperparathyroidism is a cause and is the most common cause. If we see an increase in PTH, it's going to increase calcium. It's going to pull calcium from the bones. We also see cancer being a major cause of hypercalcemia because we, if you remember when we talked about multiple myeloma, there were bone lesions and a breakdown of the bone. Even with any type of cancer, it can be, number one, a breakdown of cells from chemotherapy. It can be an invasion of the bone with malignant cells. And it can, I already talked about the myeloma. Hypercalcemia, I think this is a great mnemonic: groans, moans, bones, stones, and overtones. And as we talked about when we first started about that calcification of the shower head, that rock-like substance, that stone-like substance, it kind of helps you think, wow, if that kind of clogs everything up, I'm not saying it does. I don't think that we have crud in our intestines and veins hard like that on a shower head. However, somewhat that is true, especially when we start talking about kidney stones. But with hypercalcemia, we have constipation, which accounts for our groans, bone and joint aches, our moans, our bones, loss of calcium from our bones, and we can see breaking of bones, osteoporosis kind of things. Stones, such as kidney stones, and overtones are psychiatric overtones such as depression, confusion, and among other things. So if we have a gunking up, if you will, don't you think it would be important to hydrate to help increase the excretion of calcium from the kidneys? Loop diuretics to help with excretion. We do not ever want to use thiazide diuretics, though, because it actually inhibits the calcium excretion. On your paper, it does say something about giving calcium supplements. I think that would be wrong, wouldn't you?